Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Actually, as Gary just said, I'm also looking very much forward today because every time we have guests of these two people here, it always gets very interesting. We are going to hear from a man that for over 30 years has worked with the environment, energy, economics, and development, and a lot of different things. But one of, I think, his great number ones is what are we putting in our mouth? How are we staying healthy? What can we do to stay healthy? And what can we do to stay in balance? And today, I think he has chosen a very, very interesting topic. So I don't know if you're both going to say something, but his wife is also here. And she has worked in the university settings with a lot of different things and direct sales. And I know they are both people lovers. So we are in good hands. So William Nolan is going to tell us about the endocrine disruptors. So the word is yours.
It's
Amy,
Will. This is Will's baby.
A- Amy's just here to make sure that I get everything correctly for you. Anyways, the hardest part of this presentation is going to be getting to screen share. But as I try to do that, let me just remind everyone, many of you were on the call back in August when I started to talk about keeping healthy in today's increasingly toxic world. And this really does, as Vicky was saying, bring together my background and personal interests in environmental issues at all scales, global, local, with personal health. Because the more I've thought about it over recent years, the more I appreciate that they're really the two sides of the same coin. Our personal health is directly reflective of and related to global environmental issues. So let's see, give me just a second to do the options here to optimize picture and sound and then figure out which one we're going to be on. I think it's going to be this. Here we go. And let's see, does that give you the full screen of my
Yep,
PowerPoint?
we got it.
Okay, wonderful. The PowerPoint's probably more to keep me on track than to impress anybody. But this first slide is actually from my presentation in August. And again, we're talking about exposure to toxins of all kinds. In environmental talk, we talk about pollution. In human health, we talk more about toxic exposure. And there's two kinds that cut across both worlds. Acute incidents are happening quite often, increasingly often, everything from trains carrying chemicals that are derailed for whatever reason. I think at the current moment there's an air inversion over Karachi in Pakistan, which will probably kill hundreds of people because it's so severe. And we, even with the hurricanes and the flooding that's caused by that, it's pushing all these toxic materials and waste into the waters, and people have to deal with that as they move around and then as they begin to clean up. So those are the acute incidents. But there's for all of us now, I can safely say all of us around the world, it's now cumulative exposure, and we get it within our own home. We're not safe anywhere. Within our workplaces, our communities, the soils, the oceans, the atmosphere, everything is now being affected by these toxic chemicals which we've been producing, and so that's the really one of the primary causes of degenerative diseases and the premature deaths, the declining fertility. When I was first putting this together back in August, I had this fairly long list of sources of these dangerous drugs or materials. And the more I've looked at it, the more I realize that endocrine disruptors, which was right in the middle of the list, is really cuts across all of these and is the basis for virtually all of the serious issues. So let's focus in on these. If my and whoops, how am I going to move ahead? Uh-oh, why is my screen not advancing? Oops. Oops.
You're not sharing now.
I know.
You
What
got
happened?
out.
Well, why wouldn't my screen advance?
Sometimes this just the arrows or the space bar helps.
Yeah, that's what I was using was the
So
arrow.
you go down and click on your PowerPoint key right on the bottom of your screen. Click on that PowerPoint thing that's underlined.
Yeah, but it's
It
not.
should pop up your PowerPoint again.
Display settings. Sorry, let me try this again then.
Will
Yeah, does that back?
on the you are almost back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you want to play the slides
Yeah.
from beginning or whatever.
Thank you.
To the left.
Yeah.
Under file. Yeah.
Okay. Back on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
on.
Top.
Okay.
Well, sort of. No, you're in the back. You're in the back.
Yeah, because there's this sort of some gray box on
Yeah.
the front.
Yeah. Try it again. Try coming back out and going back in. And usually the first one that's up there is the full screen.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Then you can pull up your PowerPoint from the full screen.
Yes.
Is it showing?
Is that doing it?
There we go. Now we can see it.
Okay. Yeah. Amy came down to rescue me. Thank you. Okay. So, and the arrows still not working. Why is that?
Space bar?
Oh, okay, I can do it here. I can do it down here, I think. Yep, okay. Thank you. We'll do this manually. Anyways, very quick biology class to get us into this because these are things which we hear about, endocrines and so on, and hormones. And quite frankly, even though I've been dealing with a lot of these things for a long time, I'd forgotten the basics. And for me, the basics are that in part of the organs in our bodies are glands, and there are actually two kinds of glands. But glands both create basically liquid chemicals that are important to the body. They're the exocrine system, which we hardly ever hear about, but is very important because it includes things like our saliva, our sweat, our, almost anything which is a significant source of a liquid that's important for the body, including, for example, breast milk for mothers. Those are produced by glands. Endocrine glands come from a sort of the Latin endocrine means from internally, and these are produced by things like our pituitary gland and adrenal glands and the pancreas. Actually, the pancreas is unique within the body because it produces both these larger exocrine products as well as endocrine, very small quantities of chemicals which have very powerful impacts throughout the body and are put directly from the gland into the blood system. So they circulate very quickly, they get to where they are needed, and they have very specific roles that the body uses them for, including at every stage of growth and development. Some of them that we normally think of are estrogen and testosterone, anything which sort of creates a mood or emotion. These are hormones, which are very small chemicals in small doses, can make an amazing change in what the body is doing at the larger scale, but also are very important for growth, particularly for infants and for the fetus when it's just forming inside the mother's body. So that's the endocrine side of this. The disruption is something I want to focus on. Everybody knows what disruption and interrupt and erupt and rupture are. They all come from a Latin word called rompere, to break, and these chemicals really are breaking into our life systems. Okay, so again, we went briefly through this before, but endocrine disruptors are found particularly in these kinds of things, in plastics and food containers, in a lot of personal care products, any kind of cosmetics and deodorants, especially a lot of soaps, a lot of soaps and then cleaning products for the houses and so on, pesticides and herbicides, of course, and in our households, much of our furniture has all kinds of chemical coatings, or the wood has been impregnated with certain chemicals, and over extended periods of time, these will emit into the atmosphere. If you have ever been when you go into a hotel, you'll often be able to almost smell some of these, because their furnishings are heavily cleaned constantly, but they also are often made of materials which are designed to make them last and look clean, but actually are also constantly emitting small quantities of these chemicals, which can be disruptors. Pharmaceuticals have become a major source of these, and in agriculture, fertilizers and pesticides both. So there's a lot of sources of these at the personal level. We're all getting exposed, and again, to draw a comparison between personal and environmental approaches to things. Whether we're talking about toxins and detoxing, or pollution and cleaning up pollution, the hierarchy, if you will, that we want to be looking at is to first avoid. If we can't avoid, to prevent. If we can't prevent, to try to contain whatever it is that's causing the problem. If you can't do that, you dilute. You add water or other things to make it less concentrated. You can mitigate. You then try to ameliorate in various ways. You detoxify, you regenerate, and most of us would say you also want to redox. And that gets me to why this is really scary stuff. And I've been coming to think the last few days that as great our concern about climate change is, that these endocrine disruptors are probably or already posing a greater threat to the future health of mankind than climate change. And this comes together particularly in research which has been done for more than 20 years now by some of the top environmental specialists in the medical world. Worldwide, human sperm counts have declined by over 50% since 1973. And the data used to be just basically for North America and Europe. But over the last 5 or 7 years, the data sources have been expanded to include a lot of good confirmation that this is happening all over the world in every continent. So I would strongly recommend that you take a look at this video. You can get the URL maybe from the recording. But Dr. Shanna Swan and many people that she's worked with have been documenting this now very carefully And it's quite conclusive that not only is the sperm count of men declining by about 1% a year, but that the rate at which that's declining is accelerating, and is probably since about the year, certainly since the year 2000, at a little bit over 2% a year. And her most recent book on this, pulling it all together, is called Countdown. And the subtitle says it all: how our modern world is threatening sperm counts, altering male and female reproductive development, and imperiling the future of the human race. And again, that there are a number of videos available on YouTube, but this one in particular is a good example. If you know the YouTube channel After School, SKOOL, the fellow who's worked on that has done several videos about her, and there are other interviews and so on with her, of course, available, and it's well worth listening to at least one or two of those. And the reason it's so important is that, as she describes in her work, and as After School captured it a few years ago, by declining 1% a year, we've gone from 1973, most of us were alive then, the sperm counts have been declining almost in a straight line, coming down. Similarly, testosterone levels in males have been coming down in close parallel. And meanwhile, erectile dysfunction has been climbing, and miscarriages have been climbing. And, of all the health problems that this causes for the individuals involved, and all of the, if you will, the stress and misery of people trying to have children who just can't. And this is a major underlying reason why. You can imagine, if you've only got, it's not just the numbers of individual sperm, it's the size and health of them as well, which is declining. So very simply, this is why people are not as easily giving birth to children, but also why more and more children are being born with serious issues. And we've already seen a dramatic shift. Everyone knows the population pyramids, which are produced for every country. You start at the base of the pyramid with a lot of children, of infants, and then young children, and they grow up to become adults, and then they get older. And you want the number of people at the very top of the pyramid to be quite small compared to everybody else. And you want a healthy, growing population for the sake of the economy, politically, and for the benefit of everyone, and because this is the way every successful human society has been throughout history. Now, the dark side of this for environmentalists, of course, has always been that the more people you have, the more children you have, the more you're expanding your use of resources, particularly for young adults. The more that you're likely to run into overconsumption and abuse of natural resources in the environment. So it's always been a challenge for environmentalists to think about, how do we reduce the population growth, and maybe that would be a good thing for the planet. But as we're now seeing, it's no longer a pyramid. And this is true worldwide, but especially in countries like China, but it's becoming more like an onion bulb or something, where you've got just a very small number of children down at the bottom. You've got all these adults, which more or less healthy, and then you've got a very rapidly growing population of elderly people who need care from their younger partners within the community, within the family, within society. So this truly is a threat to everything that we're doing on the planet, economically, politically, and otherwise. And so I guess the two things that I'd like to do here is then to talk about how you get out of this. Well, let's just focus for a second on some work which was done almost 100 years ago by a dentist, an American dentist by the name of Weston Price. Dr. Price had a very successful dental practice, and he got interested in trying to understand why people have been very healthy throughout human history, particularly remote peoples, people who lived in tribal situations and weren't part of modern society. And so he traveled around for more than a dozen years in about 14 different countries. He documented very carefully. He took lots of measurements of not just teeth, but jaw structure. It's long been noted that Aboriginal peoples, if you will, Native American Indians, for example, generally had very handsome, if you will, or beautiful bone structure and facial features. And that gradually changed over the years as modern Western diets and ways of life were introduced. But he captured a lot of good information, and his conclusions are carried out, are still sort of perpetuated by the Weston Price Foundation. And Weston Price Foundation is probably best known today for promoting, naturally sourced plant and animal foods, and including raw milk, which in the U.S. has long been kind of a mainstream medical no-no. And the foundation bases its work today around nourishing traditions, as they would say. And the reason I point this out is that, as Dr. Price explained in his work, that he found that not only did these people have very natural diets, of course, and natural way of life, but that virtually all of them very clearly focused on young men and women of childbearing age, and gave them preferential treatment in terms of when, say, an animal was slaughtered or hunted successfully, particularly pregnant women and young men who had recently perhaps married or taken a mate, that they got the very best quality of food and nutrition. And I think it gets back to dealing with that population onion that we're seeing, and the problems with declining fertility, that if we're going to be serious about talking about pro-life, politics aside, the very best way to do it is going to be to really focus in on young couples of childbearing age, particularly on expectant mothers, and particularly on young children, so that their early years of their development can be as successful as possible. So, okay, again, just to recapitulate from before, we know that at an individual level, to depollute ourselves, if you will, to detoxify, there are various steps that we can take. All of us, of course, are here for cellular health education, and so that's the first and major step. We're all learning things to do to try to avoid or prevent and reduce and to detox, and to do other things at a personal level. The 5 core cellular health practices are basic to all of this, and some of these other things that we've talked about before just are all the more important once we realize how significant this has become. So with that, I'll just wrap up and leave a couple of references, which again probably will be easier to pick up from the recording. But the Endocrine Society is a professional association of endocrinologists, doctors who specialize in the hormones and endocrine system. And they're kind of a conventional medical group, but they've got some very good information available on their website. The environmental working group, I think we've talked about before. Judy and others, I think, are already quite familiar with it. And then there's another professional medical association called the Pediatric, what is it? I guess it's actually under the Physicians for Responsible Pediatrics or something like that. But they've produced an environmental health toolkit for children and infants. And I think it would be well worth sharing that with anyone that you know of who's of that age or has young children or is expecting them. And I guess just to wrap up again, my perspective on all this and much more to learn is that the health of people everywhere is really the same thing as healing our planet Earth, or if you will, healing people everywhere is essentially the same thing as the health of our planet Earth. So with that, let's open it up to discussion.
Huge topic, Will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope
But
I piqued your interest enough that you'll want to explore more on your own.
I think the endocrine system is more than interesting. And I think a lot of women has maybe got to know theirs in time if they are older. And I hope that you have listened well and that you may have some questions. Anybody? Melanie?
Yes, I want to know, when you talk about plastic containers, for food, are you talking about, like the thin plastic wrappers, or are you talking about things like, I don't want to use a word like Tupperware, but something like that. You know what I mean? When you put something in your refrigerator in some kind of a plastic holder.
I guess my quick answer, and Dr. Gary comes at this more as a physicist and much better educated chemist than I am, is that there have been some plastics which are basically regulated and discouraged from use. There are harder plastics such as, I don't know Tupperware specifically these days, but where it's a high polycarbonate plastic, which is probably pretty good for most foods for quite a while. I think the worst ones to think about using on a day-to-day basis would be the soft plastic of the flimsy water bottles that you buy in stores. The harder ones, certainly the high density polyethylene that are used for
Right.
important things are much more stable and much safer. I would encourage you whenever you can to replace those plastic, it's for food, with glass containers, because glass is definitely much more stable, and particularly for anything which is acidic, like tomato sauce or a lot of fruit things. And for meats, I like to get it out of the soft plastics that you buy it in the store, and get it either into a much harder plastic, or even better, into glass.
So
And
even if you're going to put it in the freezer, that might be even worse when you buy it packaged in.
I would just offhand, I'd say that a freezer, there's going to be less interaction between the food and the wrapper than at room temperature. And certainly, I think we mentioned this last time as well, that the kind of the worst scenario would be to be taking an artificial infant formula and putting it into a plastic bottle and then putting it into the microwave to serve it to the baby. And probably we need an entire session. I should do a little bit more research, because this is something I confess I don't know nearly enough about either. The Environmental Working Group publishes some helpful lists and tips, but I think the problem with plastics actually is the problems are endless. I mean, from the production with the hydrocarbons, the oil or whatever is being put into most of it. There are some good plastics being produced from cellulose, from natural plant material these days, and there are a number of the plastic wraps that are used for food which come from those kinds of plastics. But I think it's very difficult for us to know which ones are they actually are, and which ones are safer. But then there's the problem when, as we get the foods stored from the grocery, and then we store it in our freezer or our refrigerator or on a shelf someplace, and for there's potentially, particularly in warmer conditions, there's the leaching that goes on with that. But then we throw it away. And most communities in the US, and I would guess in Western Europe, have plastic collection programs where you're supposed to put in your plastics, maybe your glass and your metals. And so for us and many Americans, it all goes into a blue bin. And for a lot of families, I think their blue bin is probably bigger than their actual trash bag these days. But once the garbage truck rolls by, we have no idea what's actually happening to it. And I don't know the actual, certainly each community will be different, but each community which has a recycling center has to be able to make that work economically as well as physically. And it's a challenge not only to separate out the plastics, as you all know, there are little numbers or shapes on the bottoms of many plastic containers, but we very seldom look at those, and normal people have no reason to. And the garbage collectors certainly don't really get to look closely at those. And a lot of our containers are mixed material containers. They're partly plastic of several different kinds of plastic, partly plastic, partly paper. And I make an effort at least to for example, removing I keep taking milk cartons or similar kinds of liquid cartons out of our blue bin, because I know they'll never be recycled. And we have in our county probably one of the best recycling programs in the country, and they probably actually pretty much cover their costs for the county of running it, because they sell off to metals and glass and other materials recyclers. Plastic markets are changing all the time. The demand and competition between the buyers and those who actually can do plastic recycling, and each community that they can deal with as a customer. There are business transactions going on with that all the time. And again, if you were the buyer or if you were a recycler, a recycling business, you want uniformity and consistency and good purity of what you're getting. If you're getting, that's why a lot of local systems won't take mixed papers. They'll only take certain kinds of papers or whatever. And, then you get glass recycling, and people have leave the tops on their, the bottle tops onto the glass containers, and that becomes a mixed material again. And if I was running a recycling center, I'd have to figure out, is it worth trying to separate those things out from each other, or those that are not really worth doing, it'll all just go into landfill trash anyways. And then the real problems begin, because that's when either it doesn't get to the landfill, or in many cases it gets to a landfill which is not really what would you call secure. So there's a lot of leaching of the plastic materials especially, and all the bags and everything else, even from recycled plastics, which then go into the waterways, into the soil, and much of it eventually into the ocean. And that's the whole microplastics problem. And despite a lot of good efforts now to clean up rivers and even these huge swirls of plastic that are out in not just in the Pacific, but I think there are 5 major swirls of plastic now that environmentalists are working on to try to just collect as much as they can and get it back into a secure landfill. But it's those microplastics which become our, probably one of the primary sources of these endocrine disruptors, because they come back into the food chain within the oceans, within the fish and everything, and everywhere. I mean, there's lakes and streams and soils and so on, and it's all getting absorbed back into the animals and things and plants that go into our food system. So,
Interesting. But I think that Melanie has another question to your answer.
Thank you. And I also had a question about clothing, which you covered last time you spoke. But the thing, when you just said when you separate out the your milk bottles or something, what are you talking about? So I can do that too. I don't know what you meant. You said liquid drinks, but also before you get way to that, I wanted to know about synthetic materials, wearing them. Is that bad too? I know that when they decompose, that's not good for the environment, but is also wearing them.
okay,
bad?
so just really quickly, because I want to hear from other people as well. Virtually every milk container or these what we would consider as paper containers for juices or water even, they're actually have a paper base inside perhaps, but they're also coated with plastics, and it may not be the same kind of plastic inside and outside. And then maybe for the handle, if there's a little tab on it, that could be again another kind of plastic. So my understanding is that most of those kinds of little cartons and containers are pulled out of any recycling center and do go directly to landfill. So and anyway, so you can either put it in your blue box and let them take it and they'll sort it out, or you can maybe help them along a little bit and begin to do it ourselves. And on clothing, every time you run a laundry load, and you probably take out the lint collector and so on. If you're wearing synthetic materials, some portion of that lint is going to be little microplastics. So I'm not saying we shouldn't wash our clothes, But if those little if the lint is collecting cotton, pure cotton, or pure wool, linen or something, then that's a lot better for the environment than if you're wearing microplastics.
Thank you.
I think it's a very interesting discussion. I see you, Peg. Just to have a little input, in Denmark, we are actually very, very frontier on sorting our garbage. We have 14 sorting stations, and we sort almost everything. What I find really, really cool is that all of our organic things that we sort, we get back in form of soil. So we can use that in the garden. So I think that a lot of countries has learned in Denmark before, or also nowadays, every household has a bin. Here on the island, we have bin stations, meaning that when you drive out of for instance, my habitation here, we sort 6 things here in the house, and then we bring the rest to big bins that are put out, and they are very, very good at handling the things we sort, and we are actually, yeah, very progressed in that. Peg, sorry.
Good morning. One of the things, because I've read up on this about plastics, and we're just inundated with microplastics. I'm leery about even eating any kind of shellfish or fish. They've ingested, I mean, it just boggles the brain, really. And one of the things when you go out to eat, and let's say you have leftovers and they bring you a cardboard box, but the inside of it has a plastic film. So and then thinking to recycle that, well, actually it should go in the garbage, because it's the plastic film inside that would then be considered a mixed material. I mean, I don't know how we get around this, or if we do. I'm also concerned about the incoming administration and what they're doing to the EPA department. I don't know. I guess we're kind of left to our own devices to change like containers to glass, which I've been doing, rather than storing it in plastics. It's a real problem, and we're seeing that now.
Will, is it okay that we take Gary in the pool as well, so you can answer for both of them?
Oh, certainly, please. Gary has been thinking about these things for a long time himself and has a much better science base to approach it.
Yeah, I usually wait till the end, but I just wanted to kind of let people know that almost all plastics will leach. I mean, we don't put just foods in plastics, but we put cleaning materials, chemicals, hormones themselves, all sorts of industrial waste and stuff. And if we have oils and whatever, we usually put them in a plastic container, so they and so there's a lot of the real toxic stuff that was just packaged away in these plastic containers, and it can cause trouble. I just wanted to say, plastic, usually the manufacturer is pretty good at keeping the resins, good resins, and keeping a kind of a high density. Not all of them, by the way, high density plastics, so that the plastics won't chaff off or leach into foods and stuff and such. But you have, I've looked for them, and they're not very many that are really just top quality and wonderful, even though they say they are. So it is a problem. I don't know. I was going to ask Will, what do we do about it? But I think that maybe we want to be going more onto the hormonal things, which also are very concerning, because we use hormones in our meats, in our production of chickens and of everything. You've seen the pictures of the chicken before and the chicken after, where and all of those hormones and all of those drugs and all those pharmaceuticals get into the animal's droppings, get into the environment. There's just no way to avoid it. And so, yeah, I'll let Peg go on.
Well, I had a thought while this whole discussion was going on, is that, okay, so if we have to have plastics, then I had a thought of maybe we should advocate for the manufacturers to make the plastics that are the higher grades that leach the less. It's like some manufacturers come out with plastic bottles that don't leach those things. So, I mean, it's either that or go back to glass. I mean, so that's just a thought I had.
I lived in Spain for many, many years, and I don't know if you've got that system in the US, but we've got it in Europe. All manufacturers of, for instance, plastic bottles, they have to write what kind of plastic the specific bottle is made of, and that's a number system that you will either find in tiny, tiny, weedy numbers on the side by the bottom, or if you turn it upside down, you can see it in the bottom of the plastic. Because I think it's an outrage that they are allowed to even manufacture that bad plastic. And if you, for instance, go into a Chinese shop to buy fermented food because you want to do a lot of good for yourself, you have two guesses what you're going to get it in.
Mm.
Judy? Or Will, do you want to answer a bit here?
Again, as we know, plastics are everywhere. They're not going to be removed from modern economy anytime soon. It's something we all need to be learning a little bit more about. But while all of this so much of this has to be kind of negative, and how do we avoid what can't be avoided? But again, we've got some of the tools that are absolutely essential for doing the best we can within our own bodies, for our own families, and for the people who are near and dear to us who are of childbearing age and perhaps getting pregnant. And the more that we can educate those people, the better it is for everybody. Solving global environmental issues begins at home with us.
Judy?
Yeah, I would say that America is the worst offender for all of this stuff. When you talk, Vicky, about all the different bins that you have and all, they don't push that here that much. I would say even about, at least a third of the population in my little neighborhood here don't even bother to even have a recycle bin, let alone try to figure it out. And I have a gentleman living in my house right now that he got a plastic container of hot soup from a friend of his, and he took a little bit out and was going to put it in another plastic bin, little bucket, and put it in the microwave. And I stopped him and I hollered at him, "Was you trying to kill yourself?" And he just doesn't want to get it. First of all, I don't microwave anything. There's no way. The only reason I have a microwave up there is because the light is in it over the stove, and I use the light, and it does get warm in there, and I can set something in there just to let it kind of thaw out just in the warmth from the light. But speaking of lights, then I don't know if it's probably only in America, we're not allowed to have incandescent light bulbs anymore. They don't sell those. However, I did find a place that will sell them, and it's called 1000bulbs.com if anybody is interested. And you can order all kinds of different light bulbs, including all sorts of incandescent light bulbs if you want to, because they're very bad for your vision. LED bulbs are very bad for your vision. They're really blinking all the time that you can't see it just with the naked eye, but that's what they do. And it's terrible. But yeah, I am a big proponent of recycling, and it just really bothers me. I do believe that our new the new people that just came in through the election, there's a Kennedy family, Bobby Kennedy, and he is really getting ready to clean house. He's going to make sure that eventually all food is organic. And he's going to take down or weed out from the FDA. I always call that the Fraud and Deception Association. And then he's going to work on the CDC and everything else. So at least we do have hope on the horizon, but it's not going to be an overnight situation. But you really have to watch what you're eating, what you're doing. Don't ever put hot anything, especially food or drink, in a plastic container and then drink it. So, because that's going to perpetuate the leaching into your water.
I
And
hope all the people, Judy, who live in countries where it's hot know that. Because 80% of all water bottles, where are they?
that's
Outside.
flimsy. Yeah, I won't buy
Tanya?
any of that stuff. The only
Yeah.
way I drink out of one of those water bottles is if I was near death. An emergency.
I think it's the last question, I think, Tanya, because we are running a bit late and we need Will to be allowed to answer.
Okay,
Tanya?
well, hi. Okay, I'm Tanya's mom. She's here, my granddaughter, the two of them.
Oh.
But anyways, yeah, hi everyone.
Hi, Sally. I thought you throw me off every time it says Tanya.
Oh, it's her day today, so she was first mentioned. And anyways, yeah, what I've been doing for the longest time is I'd have this big bag of all, like toothpaste containers and all these things that we couldn't put in the blue box. And so I'd end up having to throw it out because you couldn't get rid of it. And then they did. I'm so glad in our village they have now a way that you can they will collect things like that, so we can take it and get it done. But I was going to ask, was it mentioned then about the hard plastic? I always use them for water. I use them for the fragrance first because I did research and I found that molecules, even breathing them in, is good for us. So once it doesn't have that fragrance anymore, I start using it for water bottles. So that it's hard plastic. So was that mentioned that it is safe to drink?
I can answer that one. Yes, that is a very thick, hard, high density plastic that does not chafe, and it doesn't also let a lot of the polycarbonates into the water, or even absorb a lot of the stuff from the whatever's in the container into the plastic. And so, that was the thing that we were looking for. It took us a long time to find that plastic bottle. I believe they still use the same one. Yeah. So yeah, use it for everything, for water storage. I use it for everything. Yeah, that's the best plastic around.
Yeah, so you can put hot water and it's not going to affect the plastic, or maybe it might.
All heat is going to release some and leach some of the resins into the so don't never store hot stuff, like Judy was saying, in a plastic container, or leave it out in the sun. So that'll always leach.
Okay, thank you for the
And
reminder.
the other good news on that is that it's a plastic which is easily recognized by recyclers and is of value for recycling. So it's definitely a win-win to use it.
Oh, good. Thank you so much.
A little idea. I don't know if Alan is still here, but Alan's wife has found. Oh, you want to tell that, Alan?
Yeah, we found out that this plastic is very variable for for making another stuff. For instance, when you're in a kitchen, there's some tiles on the walls, especially if it's a professional kitchen, and they are making tiles from the bottles from ASEA, and they will prevent a lot of the humidity in the kitchen to sit on the wall, and then making well, contains a lot of fat and so on, and it will not do that. So a friend of my son, he saw this bottle and he said, I want to try to do something with that. And he's now producing a lot of tiles with that. It's really good. And there's some kitchens now who has been taking down the normal tiles and put this up instead, because it's insulating the wall from the room or the air in the room. That's one of the things. But another thing is with the ASEA bottle is that they have changed the bottle from the stiff one to a little softer one. I still think it's the same material, but I don't know. But we have collected bottles here in Denmark for several years, and they're not coming out to the environment by garbage collection. So therefore, we have said to all the ASEA partners, when you're selling these bottles, go out to people and collect them, because then you could see that they have been drinking this. Because a lot of people in Denmark saying, well, it's never working. And sometimes I only drink half a bottle and that's it. We know a lot of these people, and we're telling them, well, it cannot be working when you are not drinking it. So therefore, please drink it and see what it does to your body. That's one of the things. Another thing is, well, we don't have time for that.
No.
Another time. That's for me.
And please allow me a little comment before we end this, because suddenly it's going to be over. On the top where you have the chat, where it says coach training, you are going to find 3 dots. If you press them, you are going to be able to save the chat. There is a lot of good links in the chat, and there's there are some internet addresses and stuff like that. So if you want to save the chat, please do it now before it's too late. Sorry, Will, the word is yours.
Oh, just thank you for listening and taking your time to join us. And a brief apology for not being able to be on live more often. But I very much appreciate also that the videos are recorded and available for watching later, because I do eventually get to them, and it's all good material. Thank you all for sharing.
Thank you for being our guest speaker today. It's always a treat when you are here, Will. Thank you very much. And I want to wrap this up because we're running a bit late. So, Gary?
Yeah, well, we've gone over a lot of things today. Will was correct when he said that, the only very small amounts of these hormones can have a large effect on people. And he was also really good at breaking down how we should try to deal with the environmental toxins that we find. And I hope you were paying attention, because he says first you should avoid them, then you should prevent them, and you should contain them. Then if they actually get out into the environment, then you should dilute them and make them as small effect on us as possible. And if we do those, our physical and physiological systems are very resilient. And so, he mentioned that reproductive health is very important. And the 10 laws of health for both will help strengthen our bodies and give us the ability that we need if we obey them. then that will give us the resilience that we need in order to be able to combat the environments that we're finding. Even more so than we can than in the rest of the world. So, please let's get that word out there. We do need, in order to be able to be healthy and to keep ourselves healthy, do the exact things that Will was saying today in his presentation. We thank you so very much. I love you guys, and hope you have a really great time. We're going to have our time together is kind of coming to an end. We are going to have the next Thursday, and then the Thursday after is Thanksgiving in the United States. So we are not going to be having our community discussions, and we'll have 2 discussions in December. But the last discussion will be mine. So I'll just be wrapping this up for the end of the year. And that's it. So there's just, 2 more or 3 more discussions we'll be having this year. I can hardly believe it. But keep safe, everybody, please. Keep well. And we'll see you soon. See you next week. Thank you.
Did you just say,
Bye.
oh, you will see us next week? Okay.
Next week, yes. The week after Thanksgiving, no. Right. And then 2 times in December. All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Take care.
Happy
Thank
weekend.
Thank you, Angels.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Angel
you.
Network.
Bye.
That's all. Bye-bye.